A bride walked slowly, her steps careful, her breath unsteady. The world around her caught between celebration and silence. Her gown, stitched by worn but patient hands, swept the dust as she advanced. It was not silk, not lace, but a plain cloth shaped into the form of a bridal dress because dignity demanded it, even when wealth had no seat at the table. Yet the absence of shoes on her feet was louder than the sound of drums. The earth received her bare soles, and every grain of sand seemed to whisper the truth she had tried to hide for so long. Poverty was not her shame, but it was her shadow, and now it followed her openly before all eyes. She had dreamed of this day since she was a child, though never like this. In her heart, she had painted pictures of flowers, of golden adornments, of steps that rang with pride. Instead, she carried herself with quiet endurance, telling herself that love would be enough, that vows mattered more than ornaments, that the bond she was about to seal would cover the cracks of lack. But deep inside her chest a war raged. Would her beloved see her heart, or would the sight of her naked feet turn his eyes elsewhere? The thought pressed on her spirit like a stone. The women who watched from the edge of the path could not contain their murmurs. They tilted their heads, some in pity, some in disapproval, others in envy hidden behind forced smiles. In their eyes, a bride without shoes was a bride unprepared, a bride who carried bad omens to the threshold of her marriage. For in the customs whispered from ancestor to ancestor, shoes meant more than protection. They meant covering, dignity, and the readiness to walk into a new home with full honor. To be barefoot was to declare emptiness. To be barefoot was to suggest that she had been rejected even by fortune. Yet she pressed forward, her chin lifted though her heart trembled. Every step she took was heavy with memory. She remembered her mother's eyes, tired from endless sacrifices, stitching late into the night just to give her a gown. She remembered how her sisters had tried to polish her bracelets, though they were made of copper, not gold. She remembered the borrowed beads that adorned her hair, beads carrying the warmth of many brides before her. And she remembered how she had quietly hidden her feet behind cloth, ashamed that no one could spare her even a simple pair of sandals. She had told herself that no one would notice, that the dress was long enough, that her smile would distract from what was missing. But now, as she walked before the village, it was clear that the missing piece could not be hidden. Love was the fire that kept her upright. She thought of his voice, gentle yet firm, speaking promises when the night was quiet. She thought of the way he had looked at her once, as if she were not poor, as if her worth was carved from the stars themselves. That memory was her secret strength. Yet love was fragile when tested by the gaze of many. Would he still see her as that shining star, or would he feel the sting of shame from the whispers of his kin? Fear gnawed at her heart, whispering louder than the drums that beat in celebration. Still, hidden beneath the fear was a stubborn hope. Hope that today would not be measured by shoes or cloth, but by the joining of two souls who had endured hardship and still chosen each other. Hope that destiny had a hand in her journey, even if the steps were bare. For sometimes it is the one who enters empty who leaves with fullness beyond measure. She did not know why this thought burned within her, but it carried her forward like an unseen hand guiding her feet. The cultural weight of her choice was not lost on anyone. A barefoot bride could symbolize humility, a surrender to the earth, an intimacy with the ancestors whose feet had walked the same soil. Some elders might have seen it as sacred, a reminder that no material covering could separate flesh from the blessings of the ground. But others, most others, saw only lack, saw only disgrace, saw only a bad sign for the marriage to come. This dual meaning wrapped around her like a double-edged sword. Was she blessed, or was she cursed? Was she walking toward love, or toward ruin? She did not know, but she knew she could not turn back. Her steps were steady, yet inside her, each heartbeat cracked like thunder. She lifted her eyes and caught glimpses of the crowd. Some faces softened, moved by her courage. Others tightened, preparing to turn this story into gossip before the evening fire. Children pointed, curious and unfiltered. Elders muttered, recalling tales of barefoot brides in old songs, stories where fate often twisted in strange directions. She could not tell whether she was becoming a song of sorrow or a ballad of triumph. She only knew she was walking toward her future. The groom stood at the center, waiting. She dared not meet his eyes just yet. What would she see there, pride or disappointment? Would his lips curve into a smile that reassured her, or would they tighten into a line of hidden regret? She longed for his gaze, yet feared it more than anything. She told herself again, love would be enough. Love must be enough. But the silence of her feet on the dust betrayed the fragility of that hope. Every grain of earth that pressed against her skin seemed to whisper secrets. Some whispered courage, urging her on. Others whispered doom, warning her to turn back before it was too late. The ground itself felt alive, aware, watching her. It was as if destiny had placed her there not by accident but by design, stripping her of adornment so that her path could not be mistaken for anyone else's. She was marked, chosen, singled out. And though she did not yet understand why, she felt the weight of it pressing down like a crown too heavy for her head. As the drums rose in rhythm, the people leaned forward. The path narrowed, and the moment sharpened like a blade. Each step became louder, though her feet made no sound. Silence spread across the gathering, and eyes locked on her bare feet. The shame she had hoped to hide now stood taller than her gown. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to freeze. And then it happened. A voice, sharp and curious, cut through the stillness like a knife. "Why no shoes?" The whisper caught like fire. Others joined, murmuring, hissing, questioning. The words swirled through the air, multiplying, until the crowd buzzed with a storm of suspicion and wonder. Children giggled, women frowned, men exchanged knowing glances. The question spread like a spell, binding everyone to the sight before them. She felt it pierce her like an arrow, felt the weight of every gaze pressing against her fragile hope. Her heart stumbled, her breath caught. Love, fear, hope, and destiny all collided in that single moment, and as she drew closer to the ceremony, surrounded by whispers that grew louder with each step, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. He waited at the heart of the gathering, his posture tall yet stiff, his face carved into a mask of calm that betrayed the storm churning beneath. The drums beat steadily, voices swirled like waves around him, yet his ears strained only for the sound of her steps. Every moment stretched like a rope drawn tight, and with each breath he battled between love's warmth and confusion's chill. He loved her, he knew he did, but love, when tested by eyes and whispers, can quiver like a fragile flame in the wind. He had seen her gown from afar, the plain cloth that wrapped her with dignity, if not splendor. He admired her courage, her grace despite the absence of riches, yet when his eyes fell upon her feet, his heart stuttered, bare, uncovered, vulnerable. The air thickened in his chest as questions swirled unbidden. Why had she come barefoot? Was it poverty, pride, or something deeper? He had promised himself that he would never judge her by what she lacked, but in this moment, surrounded by kin who valued appearances more than hearts, he felt the pressure mounting. His family's eyes were sharp. They had urged him to find a wife whose dowry would strengthen their standing, whose presence would shine brighter than gold. Yet he had chosen her, not for what she carried in her hands but for what she carried in her soul. They had not forgiven him for it, not truly. He could feel their silent scrutiny now, their disappointment sharpening like knives, ready to cut the bond before it was sealed. He wondered if they were already whispering, asking themselves why he would bind himself to a woman who walked to her wedding as though fortune had turned its back on her. His heart twisted. He remembered the long nights he had spent convincing them that love was stronger than wealth, that a woman's worth was not measured in ornaments but in faithfulness, kindness, and strength. He remembered their disapproving faces, their muttered warnings, their threats that he would regret it. And now, seeing her barefoot, their warnings seemed to echo with fresh power. Was he wrong? Had love blinded him to a reality he could not escape? But then, amid the rising tide of doubt, he remembered the first time he had seen her. She had been standing at the edge of the marketplace, her hands full of clay pots she was trying to sell. The crowd bustled past her, ignoring her quiet calls, until one pot slipped and shattered at her feet. He had watched as shame flushed her face, but instead of tears, she had bent to gather the shards, her movements calm, her expression firm. There had been dignity in her silence, courage in her composure. He had felt something stir inside him then, a recognition that here was someone who carried storms within, but never let them drown her light. Days later, he had approached her, offering help she politely refused, yet her eyes had lingered on him, wary but curious. He had returned again and again, sometimes buying a pot, sometimes simply standing nearby, until words grew into conversation, and conversation into laughter. They had walked together under fading suns, speaking of dreams too fragile to share with others. He had promised her then that she would never walk alone, that no matter what the world withheld from her, his hand would always be stretched out to meet hers. Those words returned to him now like a song carried on the wind, reminding him of what was at stake. Still, love could not silence fear. He feared the years ahead. Could he provide for her, protect her, silence the whispers of those who already looked down upon them? He feared becoming the man his family predicted, a husband chained to poverty, unable to rise. He feared the weight of expectation, the endless demand to prove his worth not just as a man but as a husband who had chosen a path no one else approved of. The pressure bent against his ribs like an iron band, and yet, as his eyes fixed on her face, he saw not shame but determination. She walked with her chin raised, her eyes steady though her feet were bare. Something in him shifted. If she could bear the whispers with such quiet strength, could he not also bear the burden of his family's disapproval? Was her courage not proof that love was more than ornaments and appearances? He wanted to believe so, but doubt still clung like shadows that refused to lift. The ceremony path seemed longer than it should. Each step she took pulled him deeper into a war with himself. He clenched his hands behind his back, steadying his breath. Around him, the voices grew louder, the whispers sharper. He felt his father's eyes burning into him, felt his mother's sigh of disappointment ripple through the air. His brothers shifted uncomfortably, as if embarrassed to stand by him. The weight of their judgment pressed down, urging him to reconsider, to turn away before vows were spoken. He felt trapped between love and loyalty, between heart and duty. But then his mind wandered, again to promises made. He remembered the night he had sworn to her under the wide sky, their hands intertwined, the moon bearing witness. He had told her that he saw not her poverty but her spirit, that he wished not for gold but for the fire in her soul. She had smiled then, shy but radiant, as though his words had given her wings. Could he betray that promise now, here, in the face of mere whispers? His chest ached with the conflict. As she drew closer, he lifted his hand ever so slightly, a silent gesture of readiness to take hers, to anchor her against the storm of eyes around them. He knew that this moment would define them both, whether they stood together unshaken or whether the cracks would widen into an unbridgeable gulf. His breath caught as her gaze finally met his, her eyes glistening with fear and hope mingled together. He longed to reassure her, to silence the doubts with a single touch. But before their hands could meet, movement stirred at the edge of the gathering. A figure stepped forward, carrying something wrapped in cloth. The murmur of voices shifted, curiosity igniting like fire. The figure approached slowly, deliberately, as though carrying more than just an object but a secret meant to pierce the very heart of the moment. All eyes turned, waiting, wondering. The groom's hand hung suspended, his heart pounding with dread. And just as he prepared to take her hand, the figure lowered the cloth, revealing an unexpected gift meant for the bride. From nowhere, a hush rippled through the crowd as the figure unwrapped the cloth. Gasps followed, sharp as blades cutting into the air, for nestled inside was a pair of shoes unlike any the village had ever seen. They glistened as though sunlight had been trapped within their stitching. The leather was supple, dark as night but gleaming like water under moonlight, and the soles shimmered faintly as though dusted with precious stones. It was not the kind of finery found in markets. It was otherworldly, almost sacred, carrying an aura that made even the boldest tongues fall silent for a moment. The people pressed forward to see more clearly. Children tugged at their mothers' wrappers, pointing with wide eyes. Elders leaned on their staffs, muttering beneath their breath, uneasy. A bride's gift should be simple, symbolic, expected, never a thing that turned heads and silenced drums. Yet these shoes were not just an adornment. They carried power, unspoken but heavy, as if the earth itself acknowledged their presence. Whispers spread quickly. Who had brought them? No one seemed to know the figure who carried them. He had appeared as though the shadows had formed into flesh and walked among them. Some swore they had seen him before, perhaps at another celebration long ago, yet no one could recall a name or a family. Others whispered that no human hands had fashioned such shoes, that they had been pulled from shrines or stolen from spirits. The uncertainty thickened the air, leaving both awe and dread mingling in equal measure. The bride's heart pounded as her eyes fell on the shoes. They were beautiful, undeniably so, and for a fleeting moment, a strange longing stirred within her. What would it feel like to slip her feet into something so rare, so radiant? What would it mean to stand tall, adorned not with shame but with splendor that silenced every whisper? The thought tempted her like a forbidden fruit dangling within reach, yet behind the glitter she felt an unease that gnawed at her soul. Beauty this sharp could only cut. The crowd, however, saw differently. To them, the shoes were salvation for the moment's shame. Murmurs rose around her, urging her to take them, to hide her bare feet behind leather and shine. "It is a blessing," some whispered. "The ancestors themselves have covered her shame," others added. But beneath the surface, there were darker whispers too, questions of why such a gift appeared, now, at the very edge of place. Vows. Questions of whether the shoes carried not blessing but curse. Her groom stood frozen, caught between suspicion and hope. He wanted to shield her, to question the origins of the shoes, but he could feel the weight of his family's gaze. To them, this was proof that fortune had not abandoned them, that perhaps destiny had stepped in to rescue his reckless choice of bride. He could almost hear his father's thoughts. Let her wear them. Let her be made acceptable. His chest tightened, for he loved her as she was, yet even he could not deny that the shoes carried an allure that threatened to sway him. The bride trembled as the stranger placed the shoes before her, bowing low as though completing some sacred rite. The drums began to beat again, but their rhythm sounded strange, hollow, as though echoing from a far-off cave. She bent slightly, gazing at the shoes more closely. The stitching seemed alive, weaving patterns that shifted when she looked too long. The soles glowed faintly, as if heated from within. She pulled back, shivering, convinced that they were more than they appeared. Still, the voices pressed in. "Wear them, child. No bride should walk uncovered. Take the gift. It is a sign of honor." The crowd became a chorus of insistence, drowning out her trembling heart. She wanted to resist, to cry out that something about the shoes felt wrong, but shame wrapped its hands around her throat. Could she refuse when all eyes demanded it? Could she stand barefoot before her groom when salvation lay glittering at her feet? Every symbol seemed tied to those shoes. To wear them would be to embrace wealth, to silence the whispers, to step into a union clothed in honor rather than pity. They promised power not just for her, but for her husband, whose family longed for a sign that their son had not made a foolish choice. They promised beauty, lifting her above gossip, turning her into the image of a bride every girl envied. Yet she felt the weight of temptation pressing harder with each passing second. Were they a gift, or were they a trap? Her thoughts raced as she remembered stories told at firesides, tales of objects too beautiful to belong to mortals, stories where those who accepted such gifts found themselves bound to destinies not their own. She thought of elders who warned that nothing comes without a price, but the crowd's eyes burned into her, demanding she prove herself worthy of the day. She looked once at her groom, searching for guidance, but his gaze was clouded, unreadable. He seemed as torn as she was, unable to speak against the tide. Her breath came shallow. She knelt slightly, reaching for the shoes. Her fingers brushed against the leather, and a shiver ran through her, cold and sharp. For a heartbeat, she swore the shoes pulsed like a living heart beneath her touch. Fear surged, but the voices behind her grew louder, urging, insisting. She could not withstand their force much longer. Her dignity hung in the balance, and though her spirit screamed to walk away, her body moved as though caught in a web too strong to break. Slowly, she slipped one foot inside. The leather closed around her like a second skin, warm and alive. A gasp rose from the crowd, some in delight, others in fear. She hesitated, trembling, before sliding her second foot in. As soon as both feet were covered, the ground beneath her seemed to shift. The drums faltered, the air thickened. A ripple of energy surged outward, unseen but felt by all. And in that moment, as the bride stood in the mysterious shoes, everything changed. At first, there was silence. The kind that stretched taut like a drum skin just before it splits. The bride stood tall in her new shoes, and for a fleeting breath, it seemed as though the world had accepted the moment. But silence rarely lasts long among a gathering of many eyes and restless tongues. Soon, voices began to murmur, soft at first, then swelling, until the air buzzed with suspicion and awe. What was meant to be a blessing had instead sown unease in every heart present. "Whose shoes are these?" one woman whispered, clutching her neighbor's arm. Her question was quickly carried to another and then another, spreading like fire through dry grass. Some tilted their heads in admiration, marveling at the craftsmanship, the shine, the way the leather clung to the bride's feet as though it had been made for her alone. Others frowned, their eyes narrowing, their voices lowered with caution. "Such beauty is not born of ordinary hands," an elder muttered. "Shoes like those are not given without reason." Admiration clashed with fear, colliding in the crowd until every gaze was divided. Some praised the bride, saying fortune had finally clothed her in splendor, a sign that the union was favored by unseen hands. Others whispered warnings, uneasy with the sudden appearance of something so rare, so untethered to the ordinary rituals of a wedding day. One group of women gushed about how radiant she looked, how the shoes transformed her from humble to queenly. Yet nearby, men muttered that no gift arrives so perfectly timed unless carried by a shadowed intent. Among them all stood one whose heart burned with envy, a rival one who had once hoped to catch the groom's eye, one who had offered smiles and tokens that never bore fruit. Her bitterness had long simmered beneath her skin, hidden behind painted lips and rehearsed laughter. Now, seeing the bride adorned in shoes that drew every gaze, her jealousy flared like oil poured onto flames. She leaned close to those around her, her whispers sharp as daggers. "Does no one wonder who sent them?" she asked, her eyes glinting. "Gifts so fine are never free. What if they were stolen? What if she knew all along and pretended at poverty only to play a trick on us all?" Her words carried weight, for jealousy often disguises itself as wisdom. The women she whispered to frowned, unease creeping into their hearts. They began to murmur louder, spreading her doubts across the crowd. Soon, admiration began to twist into suspicion, and suspicion into gossip, until the bride's splendor was no longer praised but questioned. The elders shifted uncomfortably, their staffs tapping against the ground as though calling for silence. One elder in particular, her hair silver as moonlight, lifted her chin and spoke in a low, warning tone. "Shoes that shine so bright may have walked through shadows before they reached this place. Be careful, for not every gift is given in love." Her voice carried over the murmurs, stirring a new layer of fear. Some nodded solemnly, recalling old stories of cursed objects disguised as blessings. Others dismissed her words, unwilling to let suspicion steal the beauty of the moment. But the balance was fragile. The rival fanned the flames again, stepping closer to another group. "Look at her," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. "She pretends to hesitate, yet see how the shoes embrace her as if they had long awaited her feet. Tell me, who receives such a gift at the edge of vows unless fate itself has been twisted?" Her words were poison, slipping easily into ears already half willing to believe. The bride stood still, her head held high, but she could feel the weight of the whispers pressing against her skin. She felt as though the shoes pulsed faintly beneath her feet, binding her to every voice that questioned her. Each murmur seemed louder than the drums, louder than her own heartbeat. Was she blessed, or was she cursed? She did not know. All she knew was that her choice was no longer private. It had become a spectacle, one that threatened to unravel her dignity thread by thread. The groom watched with clenched fists, torn between admiration and dread. Part of him wanted to silence the crowd, to shout that she was still his bride, that no shoes, no whispers, no envy could steal her worth. But another part of him felt the cold creep of doubt. What if the shoes truly carried shadows? What if the crowd was right, and their union had been stained before it even began? The air thickened, the voices rose, and the ceremony itself seemed to tremble on the edge of collapse. The rival smiled faintly, satisfied that her poison had spread far and wide. The bride's courage flickered, though she fought to keep her posture unbroken. She wanted to believe that love would withstand the storm, but love itself seemed fragile in the face of so many tongues. Then, just as the whispers reached their peak, one of the elders gasped sharply. The sound cut through the air like a thunderclap, silencing the crowd in an instant. All eyes turned toward him, his hand trembling as he pointed toward the bride's feet. His voice quivered, heavy with fear and recognition. "Those shoes," he cried, his words breaking the silence, "belong to someone else." The elder's cry struck the crowd like a hammer blow, and silence descended once more, heavier than before. The bride froze, her breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding so loudly she wondered if others could hear it. "Belong to someone else?" The words rang in her ears, hollow yet sharp, filling her with dread. She dared not move, dared not glance at her groom, for fear of what his eyes might reveal. The shoes that had transformed her shame into splendor had now become shackles of suspicion. Whispers returned, more venomous this time, faces that had glowed with admiration now twisted with unease. Guests exchanged knowing looks, each desperate to be the first to spread the tale beyond the gathering. And then, like a spark igniting dry wood, stories began to surface, rumors that had slept until now, waiting for a moment to awaken. One voice murmured, "I have heard of such shoes before, worn by the merchant's daughter who vanished without a trace." Another added, "Yes, they said she disappeared near the river's edge, leaving only footprints in the mud, and those prints were never washed away." A third voice insisted, "No, no, they were stolen from the shrine, offerings laid for the ancestors. Whoever wears them invites a curse upon themselves and all who stand beside them." The stories clashed, but all carried the same bitter root. These shoes were not innocent. They bore a history soaked in shadow, a crime hidden beneath their gleam. Whether stolen from the living or the dead, whether ripped from sacred grounds or lost in tragedy, the shoes were marked, and whoever wore them was bound to their stain. The bride trembled, shame and confusion gnawing at her. How could she defend herself against accusations she did not even understand? She had not asked for the shoes, had not desired them until the crowd forced her hand. Yet now, she was the one who bore the weight of their past. She felt trapped, like a fly caught in a web spun by fate. She wanted to cry out that she was innocent, that she had never seen the shoes before today, but the words clung to her throat, strangled by fear. To protest too much would only deepen suspicion. Her groom's eyes were upon her, and she could not bear to meet them. She imagined what he must be thinking was this deception. Had she somehow known of the shoes and kept it hidden? Was her poverty an act, her shame a mask, while she secretly held ties to a crime? His silence cut deeper than any words, and though she longed for his reassurance, she feared his trust was slipping through her fingers like sand. The groom's mind was indeed a battlefield. He remembered her honesty, her quiet dignity, the way she had carried herself with strength in the face of hardship. He wanted to believe in her, to shield her from the venom of the crowd, yet the doubt whispered all the same. Why did the shoes seem to fit her as though they had always belonged to her? Why did fate deliver them to her feet so perfectly timed with their vows? Was it destiny, or was it deception cleverly veiled? The questions tore at him, each one threatening to fracture the bond they had built. Beyond the gathering, gossip already began to spread. Messengers, disguised as ordinary guests, whispered into eager ears, ready to carry the tale into the marketplace. By evening, the story would be told and retold by traders and wanderers alike. A barefoot bride clothed in cursed shoes, a wedding shadowed by omens, a love threatened before it even began. The market would feast on the scandal, each retelling adding spice until truth and fiction blurred. Already, children near the outskirts repeated the story to one another with wide eyes, eager to share what they had witnessed. The bride's shame deepened as she imagined her name carried on every tongue, twisted into something she did not recognize. Her heart ached, not just for herself but for her groom, who would bear the weight of her disgrace. She feared that love might not survive such a storm, that whispers might drown out promises whispered beneath the stars. Tears pricked her eyes, but she held them back, for she knew that any show of weakness would only feed the crowd further. The rival who had stirred the flames earlier smiled with satisfaction, her envy now disguised as righteous concern. She stepped forward slightly, her voice low but piercing enough to carry. Perhaps we should ask her where she found such shoes. Perhaps we should ask why they fit so well if they do not belong to her. Her words, coated in venom, spread doubt more effectively than fire spreads through dry grass. The crowd leaned in, hungry for her insinuations. The elders shifted again, their expressions heavy with unease. Some muttered prayers under their breath, as if the presence of the shoes demanded spiritual protection. One elder raised his staff, shaking his head. "These are not shoes for a bride," he warned. "They carry stories of loss, of theft, of dishonor. To wear them is to invite the same fate." His warning only deepened the fear, and fear gave birth to louder voices. The bride finally lifted her gaze, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but the crowd's noise swallowed her courage. Her groom stepped forward slightly, torn between shielding her and demanding truth. His lips parted, but before he could speak, a voice rose from the back, strong, sharp, and dripping with dread. "Those shoes," the voice declared, ringing across the gathering, "carry blood on them." The accusation fell like thunder, rattling the ground beneath their feet. "Blood on them?" The words echoed across the gathering, pulling every whisper into silence. The bride's breath hitched, her body trembling, her eyes darting from face to face as if searching for an anchor in a sea of suspicion. But there was none. Every gaze was sharp, filled with fear or judgment. Her heart cried out silently to the one person she believed would stand by her, yet even his eyes were clouded. The groom's chest tightened as though invisible hands were squeezing the life from him. Love had been his compass, guiding him through storms of disapproval, but now suspicion seeped in like poison, muddying the path. Protect her or doubt her? The question throbbed in his mind with every heartbeat. He longed to believe in her innocence, to shut out the crowd and hold her hand, to remind her of promises whispered in secret. But the weight of so many accusing voices, the warning of elders, and the sudden chill in the air made his faith falter. He took a step closer, his voice low, strained. "Tell me it is not true." His words cracked like glass under pressure, fragile and desperate. The bride's eyes widened, shimmering with pain. "I know nothing of these shoes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never sought them, never touched them until today. I swear it on all I hold sacred. You must believe me." Her plea struck him deeply, yet doubt gnawed at his heart. He remembered the way the shoes had fit her so perfectly, as though shaped for her feet alone. He remembered the way she had hesitated, yet still placed them on. Could it be chance, or was there a hidden truth she had kept from him? His silence stretched between them, heavy and cruel. The bride reached out, her fingers trembling as they sought his hand. "Do not turn from me now," she begged. "You know me. You know my heart. Am I not the woman who shared her dreams with you? Am I not the one who stood by you when all others doubted?" Tears gathered in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks, but still she held her chin high, refusing to collapse under shame. "Do not let their whispers steal what we have." The crowd pressed closer, eager for a spectacle. The rival suitor, who had long envied the groom's place, stepped forward with a false air of concern. His eyes glimmered with satisfaction, though his face wore a mask of sympathy. "Perhaps she speaks truth," he said smoothly, his voice carrying just enough sincerity to deceive. "But is truth not proven by clarity? If her hands are clean, let her return the shoes. Let her walk as she came, barefoot, humble, honest. A bride with nothing to hide needs no covering from shadows." The rival's words wove through the crowd like a spell, planting seeds of doubt even deeper. The bride's face flushed with fury and despair. "You twist the truth," she snapped, her voice trembling. "You have long desired to see me fall. Do not cloak your envy with false wisdom." The rival smiled faintly, unbothered by her defiance, for he knew that doubt once planted was hard to uproot. The groom's jaw tightened. He looked between them, torn by conflicting truths. His bride's desperation, her tears, her trembling voice, they spoke of innocence. Yet the rival's words carried a cruel logic. Why not remove the shoes if they bore such accusations? But he knew too that removing them now, in front of all, would humiliate her beyond repair. The struggle carved deep lines in his face as he tried to decide where his loyalty lay. He remembered again their nights together, her laughter beneath the stars, the softness in her eyes when she spoke of a future built not on riches but on love. Could those memories be false? Could the woman he cherished be tied to a crime cloaked in leather and shine? The questions cut him in ways he had never known, and each cut bled trust away. The bride clung to hope. "I beg you, look at me, not at them. Do not weigh my worth on their gossip. Look at my eyes and see my truth." Her voice shook, but it carried a fierce strength that demanded he listen. She was fighting not only for his trust but for the very bond that defined her existence. But his heart wavered. Love trembled when poisoned by suspicion. His silence stretched, the crowd holding its breath, waiting for his verdict. The rival leaned in subtly, his presence pressing against the moment like a shadow eager to swallow light. The groom's family watched closely, their expressions hard, as though daring him to choose wrongly. Finally, the groom's shoulders slumped. He turned his face away, unable to meet her pleading eyes. With slow, deliberate steps, he moved back, placing distance between them. The bride gasped, her hand falling to her side, her body trembling as though struck by a blow. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some triumphant, others mournful. And so, with the world watching, love faltered beneath the weight of doubt. The groom, torn between his heart and the voices around him, made a shocking choice. He stepped away from her. A woman who had once walked toward love now turned her steps into the embrace of darkness alone. The bride's head was bowed, not from lack of strength but from the crushing weight of shame that pressed upon her shoulders. Her feet, now bound in shoes that carried both wonder and curse, moved forward in silence, and each step carried the sting of betrayal. She had entered the gathering with hope in her chest, but she left it with her heart shattered, abandoned in the moment when she had needed her beloved most. The crowd did not call her back, they let her go, their whispers following her like shadows. Every murmur was a blade slicing deeper into her already wounded spirit. Her vision blurred with tears, but she held herself upright, refusing to collapse before those who had judged her. Pride was all she had left to shield her from complete ruin, though inside, humiliation burned hotter than fire. Her emotions twisted violently within her. Betrayal clawed at her chest, reminding her that the one man who had sworn never to let her walk alone had stepped away in the moment of trial. Humiliation followed, searing her skin as she imagined how the story would spread: the barefoot bride who wore cursed shoes, the bride who was abandoned before vows could bind her. Rage flared too, sharp and wild, aimed at the rival who had poisoned the air with envy, at the elders who spoke warnings but not protection, at the crowd that craved scandal more than truth. Yet beneath it all, grief rose like a tide, threatening to drown her. Each step echoed in her ears louder than the drums that had once promised celebration. It was as if her footsteps had become their own music, a mournful rhythm that announced her downfall. The shoes clung to her feet, heavy now, no longer a gift of splendor but chains that bound her to sorrow. She wanted to tear them off, to hurl them into the dust, but some unseen force seemed to hold them fast, mocking her with every step. The path stretched endlessly, though she knew it well. Each tree, each bend, each stone she passed seemed to watch her, bearing silent witness to her disgrace. She imagined their roots and branches whispering together, carrying the story further than human tongues could reach. In that lonely walk, she felt the whole world turn against her, every element joining in the chorus of her humiliation. Her mind fled backward into memory, seeking comfort in promises once made. She remembered the night when her groom had first taken her hand beneath the stars, his voice soft but steady as he told her she would never again stand alone. She remembered the warmth in his eyes, the way he had spoken of a future not built on riches but on love's unshakable bond. Those words had been her anchor in storms, her light in darkness, but now, those promises felt like fragile glass shattered on stone. The man who had sworn to shield her had turned away, leaving her exposed to the cruelty of many eyes. She replayed his silence over and over, the way he had looked at her, torn, uncertain, then distant, cut deeper than any blade. She wondered if his heart had ever truly belonged to her, or if she had been clinging to a dream woven from her own hope. Was she foolish to have believed in love when the world measured worth in gold and cloth? Was she naive to think her bare feet could walk the same path as those adorned in splendor? Each question gnawed at her, deepening her despair. And yet, despite her storm, a spark of defiance remained. Her tears fell, but she refused to crumble. If love had abandoned her, if the crowd had mocked her, if fate itself had shackled her to cursed shoes, still she would walk. She would not stop until her spirit decided its own end. Her dignity, though battered, would not surrender entirely. Her footsteps became a vow. Even in loneliness, I will keep walking. Still, her loneliness was unbearable. The silence pressed too heavily, the darkness too vast. She longed for a hand to catch hers, a voice to remind her she was not lost. But the night offered no comfort, only the hollow echo of her shoes against the earth. Each step was a reminder of what she had lost, each sound a cruel echo of drums that now beat only in memory. The sky above was indifferent, the stars distant, their light cold. She looked upward once, her lips trembling with a question she could not voice. Was she cursed from the start, destined to carry sorrow no matter how hard she fought for joy? Or was there still a path unseen, one that led beyond this valley of disgrace. No answer came, only the rustle of leaves stirred by an unseen breeze. Her body moved forward, but her heart dragged behind, heavy as stone. She thought again of the marketplace where they had first met, of the laughter they had shared, of the vows whispered when no one else listened. She wondered if he thought of those moments too, or if he had already erased them from his heart. Did he regret choosing her? Did he wish to undo every step that had brought them here? The questions clawed at her until she felt hollow, her chest an empty cavern echoing with pain. The further she walked, the more the path seemed to close around her. Shadows lengthened, and the trees pressed closer, their branches reaching like fingers. She no longer knew if she walked toward safety or deeper into despair. All she knew was that the gathering lay far behind, and before her stretched only silence. Her breaths came shallow, her strength waning, but still she pressed on, unwilling to let the crowd's laughter be her final sound. And then, just as her spirit began to sink into resignation, a new sound broke the silence. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing against the earth. Her heart froze, her body stiffening as fear rushed into her veins. She turned her head slightly, straining to listen. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was following her. On the lonely path, burdened with shame and betrayal, the bride heard the approach of footsteps behind her. The footsteps grew louder, steady against the silence of the path. The bride froze, her body rigid, her heart hammering in her chest. Every story she had ever heard of cursed gifts, of spirits that walked in shadows, of enemies who preyed on the weak, came rushing into her mind at once. She turned slowly, her breath caught between fear and defiance. And there in the half-light stood a figure cloaked in darkness. Not all who follow are enemies, yet in that moment she could not tell which kind had found her. The figure stepped closer, the dim glow of the moon catching his face. His features were sharp, his eyes unreadable, and though he bore no weapon, his presence was heavy, unsettling. He raised a hand, not in threat but in calm, as though to show he meant no harm. Still, she trembled, every instinct torn between fleeing into the night or standing her ground. "I know what you carry," the stranger said, his voice low and rough, like gravel sliding down stone. "Those shoes are not yours to wear, yet they cling to you because fate has placed them there." The bride's lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to demand who he was, what he wanted, why he had followed her. Yet suspicion sealed her voice. Could this be another rival, sent to trap her further? Or was he what he claimed, someone who knew the truth behind the shoes that now bound her steps? "You fear me," he continued, reading the tension in her body. "And you should. Not because I wish you harm, but because truth itself can wound. If you listen, you may find your heart torn deeper than it already island. If you do not, you may walk blind into a fate you cannot escape." Her voice finally broke free, sharp with mistrust. "Why should I believe you? You appear from the dark, speaking riddles, while the world calls me cursed. If you know something, speak it plain, or leave me in peace." The stranger's eyes glinted in the moonlight, and he stepped closer still, his voice softer now, almost mournful. "Very well. These shoes, they are not mere leather and thread. They were wrought in secrecy, touched by hands that should never have shaped them. Once they belonged to another, a woman whose end was shrouded in mystery. Some say she vanished near the river, others that she was claimed by the spirits she offended. But all agree on one thing: her feet wore these very shoes, and she was never seen again." The bride shivered, horror creeping into her veins. "And now they are mine?" she whispered. "What crime have I committed to deserve such a burden?" "You are not guilty," the stranger said, his tone firm. "But innocence does not shield you from destiny. The shoes were meant to return, to find another host, to draw out truths long buried. Whoever placed them before you knew what they carried. Perhaps they sought to shame you, perhaps to bind you to a curse that should have ended long ago. But now the choice is no longer theirs, it is yours." Her thoughts spiraled, tangled between fear and disbelief. Could this be true? Had she been marked not by her poverty but by forces far older, far darker? Her heart screamed to tear the shoes from her feet, yet when she tried, she felt again the strange grip, the way they clung as though alive. She looked up, her voice breaking. "How can I be free of them?" The stranger shook his head slowly. "Freedom does not come by casting them aside. That is why the woman before you vanished. She tried to flee without facing the truth. These shoes are not only curse, they are mirror. They reveal betrayal. They uncover hidden bloodlines. They drag secrets into the open. To walk in them is to walk a path of pain but also of revelation. The bride's breath quickened. Then, who betrayed me? Who placed them before me? Who seeks to ruin me? The stranger's gaze hardened. That you must discover. But know this, the rival who smiles with envy, the family who disapproves, the lover who falters all, may be tested. The shoes do not lie. They burn falsehood. They cling to truth. Already they have begun their work, for you stand abandoned by the one who swore to stay. Ask yourself, was his love strong, or was it always waiting for the first storm to break it? His words pierced her deeper than any blade. She felt tears sting her eyes, yet she clenched her fists, refusing to let despair consume her. If what you say is true, then these shoes are both curse and key. But why tell me this? Why follow me at all? For the first time, the stranger's expression softened, touched by something almost like sorrow. Because I, too, once knew the woman who wore them before you. I cared for her, but I could not save her. Perhaps by guiding you, I can atone for my failure. Or perhaps I only doom you further. That is the burden I carry. She stared at him, torn between suspicion and the strange pull of his words. Trust him, or cast him aside? If he lied, she risked being drawn deeper into ruin. If he spoke truth, then ignoring him could seal her fate. Her heart wavered on the edge, unable to choose. Before she could speak again, a sudden gust of wind tore through the path, whipping leaves into the air. She blinked, shielding her eyes, and when she looked again, the stranger was gone, vanished, as if swallowed by the night itself. Her chest heaved, her body trembling with the shock of his sudden absence. Then, as silence reclaimed the path, she felt something shift within the shoes. A faint rustle, almost like paper hidden within the seams. Her breath caught as she knelt, pressing her fingers inside. And there, lodged deep in the lining, she found a clue the stranger had left behind. The shoes, cursed and unyielding, carried more than just her shame. They carried secrets waiting to be unearthed. To win back the love she had lost and cleanse her name, the bride knew she must face more than whispers. She must conquer the curse itself. The stranger's words echoed in her mind. The shoes did not merely adorn, they revealed. If she wanted to prove her innocence, if she wanted her beloved to believe in her again, she would need to endure the path they demanded. Her shame would not be washed away by tears, nor her dignity restored by denial. Only through trial could truth be uncovered. As she returned, from the lonely path, her feet heavy with the secret clue hidden inside the shoes, she resolved to stand before the gathering once more. Gasps met her return, for many thought she had vanished in disgrace, yet her eyes now carried a different fire. Fear still burned in her chest, but beneath it was a fierce determination. She would not walk away, shrouded in suspicion. She would stand and face whatever test fate had carved for her. The elders, stirred by her courage, gathered at the front. Their staffs thudded against the earth, a sign that the time for ordinary ceremony had ended. One of them spoke, his voice deep as rolling thunder. If the shoes are cursed, let them declare it. If they are innocent, let them bless her steps. We will call upon the spirits to reveal what no man's eyes can see. The crowd fell silent, unsettled but eager. They knew what such a test meant. Rituals were not called lightly. Omens were not sought without consequence, yet the air itself seemed to demand it, thick with the weight of unresolved truth. The rival suitor smirked faintly, convinced the trial would end her dignity once and for all. The groom stood at a distance, hidden among the crowd, his eyes fixed on her though his body remained apart. He did not yet know if he believed her, but his heart would not let him turn fully away. The ritual began with a circle drawn in white chalk upon the earth. The bride was led to its center, her bare head lifted toward the night sky. The drums began to beat, not in celebration now, but in solemn rhythm, echoing the heartbeat of the ancestors. A masquerade entered, its mask painted with symbols of judgment, its steps slow and deliberate. The figure circled her, its staff striking the ground with every beat of the drum. If she is false, the elders intoned, let the shoes betray her. If she is true, let them bear witness. The bride's chest tightened, every instinct screamed to flee, but she held her ground. She closed her eyes. and whispered within, not to the crowd, not even to the groom, but to the unseen powers that watched. If I have wronged, let me fall. But if I am innocent, let truth rise with me. The masquerade halted before her, its mask inches from her face. A hush swept across the gathering as the figure raised its staff. Sparks flared as the tip struck the ground, and the air shifted, heavy with unseen presence. The bride's feet began to burn faintly, not with pain but with heat, as if the shoes themselves had awakened. She winced but did not step away. Her dignity depended on her endurance. Then came the omens. A wind stirred, though the night had been still, swirling dust around the circle without crossing its boundary. The flames of torches flickered and bent inward, pointing toward her as though she were the heart of the storm. A hawk's cry pierced the air, though no bird was seen above. The people whispered, some trembling, some nodding with awe. These signs spoke of power at work, though whether it was curse or blessing none could yet say. The rival suitor shouted from the edge, his voice dripping with false concern. You see? The shoes consume her. She cannot stand without their fire. Take them off, and let her prove her truth barefoot, as she came. But the elders silenced him with a sharp gesture. The shoes are the test, they declared. What they reveal, we shall accept. The rival scowled, his plan faltering, but he did not retreat. Instead, he whispered to those near him, sowing more doubt like weeds in fertile soil. The bride's strength faltered as the heat grew, and she swayed, her knees bending. But she remembered the stranger's words. The shoes reveal betrayal, they burn falsehood. She straightened her back, her tears falling but her spirit unbroken. With trembling hands, she pressed her palms to the earth, offering herself in a gesture of surrender. Take my pride, take my shame, but do not take my truth, she whispered, her voice carried across the circle, quiet but clear. It was an emotional sacrifice, her willingness to give up everything but her innocence. The crowd stirred. Some moved, others unsettled. Her groom, still hidden in the shadows, felt his heart twist. He wanted to rush to her, to gather her in his arms, to end the trial. Yet fear chained his feet. What if she was false? And his defense tied him to her ruin. Still, his eyes did not leave her, and his soul ached with every moment she suffered. The masquerade struck the ground again, harder this time. The circle's chalk lines glowed faintly, pulsing like veins of light. The shoes responded, glowing from within, their shimmer brighter than before. Gasps rose from the crowd as the light spread upward, casting the bride in an unearthly glow. Her eyes widened, and her breath caught. She felt the shoes alive beneath her feet, their energy thrumming like a second heartbeat. The elders leaned forward, their voices tense. The shoes speak. The rival stepped back, his smirk faltering as unease flickered across his face. The crowd leaned closer, their whispers rising like waves. The bride's fear mingled with hope, for though the light was strange, it did not consume her. It lifted her instead, holding her steady. And then it happened. The glow shifted suddenly, bending outward, its light pointing not at her but beyond the circle. The crowd gasped as the glow pulsed like a finger extended, singling out someone among them. The bride's breath caught, her heart racing. She did not yet know who, but the message was clear. The shoes had chosen. The true culprit was near. Sometimes the face of kindness hides the hand of betrayal, and in that circle of judgment, the truth began to unmask itself. The glowing shoes cast their light outward, illuminating the crowd like a torch, searching for shadows to expose. People recoiled, covering their faces as though afraid the glow might single them out. Gasps spread. Children clung to their mothers, and men shifted uneasily, whispering prayers beneath their breath. The bride, though trembling, lifted her chin. Her suffering had brought her to this moment, and she would endure it until the end. The light moved slowly, deliberately, scanning faces as though weighing hearts. It paused once, twice, before flickering toward the rival suitor, who had poisoned the air with envy from the very beginning. His face drained of color, his false smile faltering. The glow lingered, and the crowd erupted into murmurs. Fingers pointed, voices rose, suspicion thickened. It is him, someone whispered, the rival who would have taken her place. The rival tried to compose himself, forcing laughter that rang hollow. Do not be deceived by tricks of light, he said, his voice loud but quivering. I have only spoken truth, only sought to protect what is sacred. Would you accuse me because the air dances strangely upon my face? But the glow refused to leave him, pulsing brighter as though calling him out with silent fury. The elders frowned, their voices grim. The shoes reveal what lies beneath. They have chosen their target. The crowd surged with anger and disbelief. Some shouted accusations, others defended him, insisting he had long been a faithful member of the community. Yet whispers of his envy, his unspoken longing for the groom's place, now surfaced with fresh venom. Memories of past slights, overlooked until now, poured forth from those who had once ignored them. The rival was no longer untouchable. The mask of his kindness had cracked. The rival's face twisted, his composure breaking. "And what if I did?" he spat suddenly, his voice sharp, his eyes blazing. "What if I wished to see her fall? Is she not beneath him? Did I not deserve to stand where she stands? I, who could have lifted his family higher, who could have given him the wealth he lacks. Yet he chose her, a barefoot bride, and now you see the ruin she brings. Yes, I stirred the whispers. Yes, I fanned the flames. And why should I not? She never belonged here." The crowd gasped, their shock rippling outward like waves. Even those who had doubted the bride fell silent, stunned by the venom in his words. He had confessed, not with humility, but with rage, bearing his jealousy for all to see. The bride's heart clenched. But instead of breaking further, a strange strength rose within her. She had been dragged through humiliation, tested by fire, but now the truth that she had endured for was surfacing. Her spirit straightened, her eyes steady as she faced him. "You speak of wealth and pride," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "But love is not built on envy. You sought to destroy me because I was chosen, not because I wronged you. The shoes did not lie, they revealed the shadow you carried in your heart." Her words carried across the circle, and the crowd shifted. Some nodded, their eyes opening to what had been hidden all along. Others muttered prayers, asking forgiveness for doubting her. The elders raised their staffs, striking the ground to still the noise. "The shoes have unmasked envy," one declared. "Jealousy has spoken with its own mouth. This is the truth revealed." The rival's face twisted with fury, his pride crumbling as the people turned against him. Yet even as guilt clung to him, his cunning mind sought escape. He pointed suddenly at the bride, his finger trembling but his voice rising with desperate conviction. "Do not be fooled," he shouted. "Do you not see? She wears them. She is the one who carries them as if they belong to her. What if she placed them here herself, to ensnare us all? What if this trial is her trick, and I, the scapegoat she needed? Do not be blind to her deceit." The crowd recoiled, torn once again. The glow still burned against him, yet his words carried venom enough to plant fresh doubt. Eyes turned back to the bride, suspicion rekindling. She felt the weight of their stares, the cruel cycle of judgment threatening to bind her once more. Her strength wavered, but she held her ground, refusing to cower. The groom, still watching from afar, clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened. His heart ached as he saw her face brave yet battered, strong yet vulnerable. He knew he should step forward, should shield her from the rival's final strike, yet hesitation bound him still. Love pulled him, but doubt chained him, and he remained hidden in the crowd, his silence like a wound. The rival's eyes gleamed with a desperate light, his words slicing through the air. "Yes, I envied. Yes, I spoke. But is it not convenient that the shoes fit her perfectly? Is it not strange that fate chose her of all women? Perhaps she is not victim but master of this curse." The air thickened once more, the drums beating faster, echoing the rising tension. The bride stood in the circle, her heart thundering, the people wavering between belief and doubt. She had endured humiliation, endured betrayal, endured trials of fire, yet now the rival sought to twist truth into another weapon. And just as the crowd teetered between judgment and vindication, the rival's trembling hand remained outstretched, his finger pointed squarely at her. "She is the mastermind," he cried. The circle erupted with gasps, the cliffhanger carved in the air, the fate of the bride hanging by a thread. In the silence of the night, when even the wind dared not stir too loudly, the community gathered for one final test. Whispers had filled the air with suspicion and venom, but the elders declared that truth could not remain hidden if sought through the ancient ritual of the dance. It was a dangerous path, for the dance of judgment did not simply entertain it exposed. Masks would fall, lies would burn, and the guilty would be left bare before all. None could escape its verdict. Torches lined the open space, their flames casting long shadows that trembled across the earth. The drums began, not in celebration, but in a deep, pulsing rhythm that echoed the heartbeat of the gathering. Every man, woman, and child pressed closer, their faces lit with anticipation and fear. The masquerades entered, their painted masks fierce, their movements slow and deliberate, each step stirring dust into the air like smoke rising from an unseen fire. The circle was drawn once again, and the bride was led to its center. The elders spoke with solemn authority. The shoes are accused, the bride is accused, the rival is accused. Tonight, the dance will decide. Whoever stands innocent will be embraced by the earth. Whoever stands guilty will be cast down by fire. Their words rolled like thunder, and silence followed, heavy as stone. The bride trembled as she was commanded to wear the shoes once more. She had hoped never to feel their grip again, but the ritual demanded it. Her hands shook as she bent, slipping her feet inside. Instantly the leather tightened, alive once more, clinging to her as if unwilling to ever release. A murmur swept through the crowd, fear mixed with awe. The rival sneered, confident the dance would expose her as the mastermind he accused her of being. The groom watched from the edge, torn still, yet his eyes never left her. The drums quickened, and the masquerades began their movements, circling the bride with rhythmic steps. She was instructed to dance as well, to let her feet speak where her tongue could not. With trembling limbs, she moved, her body swaying, her steps hesitant at first but then guided by something beyond her. The shoes pulsed with strange heat, carrying her across the circle in patterns she did not choose. The crowd gasped, for it seemed the shoes themselves were leading her. The rival was dragged into the circle too, commanded to join the dance. He resisted at first, but the masquerades pushed him forward until he stood opposite her. His movements were awkward, jerking, his face twisted with fear and anger. The bride's steps, though trembling, carried a strange grace, as if the shoes recognized her spirit. The rival stumbled, his feet heavy, the earth rejecting his rhythm. The contrast grew clearer with each beat of the drum. The elders chanted, their voices weaving with the drums. If she is false, let the shoes betray her. If he is false, let the earth cast him down. Truth cannot hide when the dance is called. Their words echoed, and the people swayed with the rhythm, eyes fixed on the pair. As the dance continued, signs began to emerge. The bride's steps grew lighter, her body moving as though lifted by unseen hands. The torches bent toward her, their flames steady and bright. Meanwhile, the rival's steps faltered, his body sweating, his face paling. Shadows clung to him, his movements harsh and broken. The people began to murmur, their doubt shifting once more, their eyes narrowing on him. The groom's heart pounded as he watched. For the first time, he saw the truth not in whispers or accusations, but with his own eyes. The shoes that had once seemed cursed now revealed their purpose. They did not bind the innocent, they betrayed the guilty. His chest tightened with shame for having doubted her, but relief stirred within him too. She had spoken truth all along, and he had failed her. His eyes glistened as he whispered to himself, "Forgive me." The rival, desperate, shouted above the drums, "This is trickery. The shoes lie. The dance lies. She controls it." But even as he spoke, his body stumbled, his knees striking the ground. The crowd gasped, some recoiling, others nodding grimly. The masquerades struck their staffs against the earth, surrounding him, their masks glowing in the torchlight. "The guilty cannot hide," they intoned. "The earth rejects your steps." The bride's eyes filled with tears as she danced on, her movements now steady, almost serene. For the first time since the day began, she felt a glimmer of freedom, a sense that the truth was finally piercing through the storm of lies. The crowd's murmurs shifted, admiration rising, pity fading, respect replacing scorn. She felt their eyes soften, their judgment beginning to melt away. She lifted her face to the sky, whispering her gratitude to the unseen powers that had defended her. And then, just as hope surged within her, pain shot through her feet. At first it was a faint burn, a warmth she thought she could endure. But within moments, the heat intensified, searing her skin as though the shoes had turned to fire. She gasped, staggering, her body twisting as pain flooded her. The crowd cried out, some rushing forward, others frozen in fear. The elders leaned in, alarmed, their chants faltering. The shoes glowed brighter than ever, their light blazing like molten embers. The bride screamed, clutching at her legs, her body convulsing as though caught between acceptance and destruction. The crowd erupted into chaos, some shouting that she was blessed, others that she was doomed. The rival, still on his knees, laughed bitterly through his pain, his voice raw. You see, even now, the fire consumes her. The groom surged forward, unable to hold back any longer, his heart breaking at the sight of her agony. But before he could reach her, the elders raised their staffs, commanding all to stay back. The trial was not yet complete. The shoes had proven her innocence, yet now they burned her as if demanding one final revelation. And in that searing moment, as the flames licked invisible across her skin, the bride realized with horror that the trial was not over. The shoes had chosen her as innocent, but they were not finished with her. Something deeper, something more dangerous, was about to be revealed. From the ashes of shame, love rose again, but not without scars to mark the path it had taken. The bride's cries pierced the night as the shoes burned, their fire consuming not her innocence but the last traces of doubt that clung to the gathering. When the light finally dimmed, she fell to her knees, trembling, but the circle glowed steady and calm. The elders raised their staffs and spoke with voices like stone. The fire burns only what is false, she stands as truth. The crowd erupted not with suspicion this time, but with awe. Mothers clutched their children, whispering that they had seen a woman survive the fire of judgment. Men bowed their heads, humbled by the sight. Even those who had once mocked her poverty now gazed at her with reverence. The rival lay broken, his words silenced by the power that had rejected him. His pride, once towering, had crumbled into dust before all. The community turned their eyes upon him with disgust, no longer fooled by his false concern. He was marked by shame, his envy laid bare. The bride lifted her head slowly, her body weak, her face streaked with tears and sweat. Yet in her eyes burned a light stronger than before, a light that had survived fire and humiliation. She was no longer merely a poor girl walking barefoot to her wedding. She was a woman who had endured trials that would have shattered many. Her strength, though tested, had proven unbreakable. The groom pushed through the crowd at last, no longer able to hold back the tide of his heart. He fell to his knees before her, his voice shaking with regret. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I doubted when I should have trusted, turned away when I should have stood beside you. I let fear poison what love had built. If you still have room in your heart, let me walk again by your side." His tears fell, unashamed, onto the earth. The bride looked at him long and hard, her heart torn between love and hurt. She remembered the moment he had stepped away, the wound it had carved into her spirit, yet she also remembered the nights they had shared, the promises he had spoken, the tenderness in his eyes when the world was silent. Slowly she reached out her hand. "Love is not without scars," she said softly. "But scars remind us of battles survived. If you will carry mine, I will carry yours." The crowd sighed with relief, their murmurs swelling into song as the two were reunited. Love, though shaken, was rekindled in the fire of truth. The groom bowed his head against her hand, vowing silently never again to falter in trust. Around them, voices rose, singing old songs of endurance, of bonds forged through trials. The elders nodded in solemn approval, for the community had witnessed not only justice but renewal. Attention turned to the shoes, which still glowed faintly at the bride's feet. They had revealed truth, but they had also brought agony and near ruin. The elders conferred briefly, their expressions grave. Finally, one spoke. "These shoes do not belong to mortal hands. They are touched by forces older than memory. To leave them here is to invite their curse again. They must be returned to the place from which they came or destroyed." The bride bent, trembling, and removed the shoes. For the first time since she had put them on, they released her willingly, sliding from her feet as though their task had been completed. She stood barefoot once more, but this time her bare feet were not symbols of shame. They were symbols of resilience, of a woman who had walked through humiliation, betrayal, and fire, yet still stood. The earth beneath her feet felt cool, welcoming, sacred. The shoes were lifted carefully, wrapped in cloth, and carried to the elders. Some argued they should be destroyed by flame, others that they should be buried deep in sacred ground where no hand could reach them. At last, they were taken toward the shrine at the edge of the village, to be sealed away where only the spirits could guard them. The crowd watched solemnly, knowing they had witnessed the end of something that should never have begun. The bride stood tall, barefoot in the center of the circle, her dignity restored. She no longer needed ornament or adornment to be radiant. Her strength was her crown, her endurance her garment. The groom rose beside her, his arm steady at her back, his presence no longer wavering. Together they faced the people, no longer as figures of scandal but as symbols of survival. The community bowed, acknowledging the truth revealed through trial. As the night waned, the song softened into hums, the torches burned low, and the stars gave way to the faint light of dawn. The bride watched the horizon, her heart filled with both peace and questions. She had proven her innocence, restored her dignity, rekindled love, and silenced envy. Yet a shadow lingered in her thoughts. The shoes had been carried away, hidden beyond mortal reach, but had they truly vanished? Or would they, like curses often do, find their way back when the world least expected it? The first rays of sunlight touched her bare feet, and she closed her eyes, breathing deeply. She was free, for now. But as dawn broke, a question hung in the air like mist clinging to the earth. Would the shoes remain sealed forever, or were they destined to return once more? If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were in the bride's place? Make sure to like this video if you felt the suspense, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss more powerful tales like this. Your support keeps these stories alive, and the next one may be even more unforgettable.